Okay, I think we will go ahead and get started. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the FTC Safeguards rule and what CPAs need to know. I have the owner of Accent Consulting here with me. His name is Phil Wright. And we're going to be going over everything. He'll be going over it all with you. But before we do get started, just wanted to go over a couple housekeeping things. If anybody has questions, please do post those in the Q&A down at the bottom of your screen. We're going to reserve the chat section for some links with additional information that we'll send out. And then we'll also send those links to you via email after the meeting as well. All right, Phil, I'll let you take it away.
All right, thanks, Jessica. Let me share my screen. All right, is that coming up okay?
Yes, looks good.
Got that? Okay, great. All right, so yeah, today I think we're going to go through the FTC safeguard rules. I think we can cover most of this in 15 to 20 minutes. And as she said, if there's any questions, just put it in the chat and we will answer those at the end. So quick introduction about me. My name is Phil Wright. I'm the founder and CEO of Accent Consulting. Accent Consulting is the #1 managed service provider in the state of Indiana, 2 years back to back. We do managed services, we do cybersecurity, we do compliance. Got 3 offices, Lafayette, Fort Wayne, and Indianapolis, and over 30 employees. So what is the FTC safeguard rule? So back in 2003, FTC defined that financial institutions are required to develop and implement and maintain an adequate data security program. And in 2021, they took some amendments to it. So they added some more detailed requirements, more accountability. They added some exemptions, and they also defined a little bit more what they define as a financial institution. We'll go through that. As a reminder, the compliance deadline is on June 9th. So if you haven't got this implemented yet, do that really soon. That deadline's coming up pretty quick, and you get started on it. So what is a financial institution? FTC defines that as any organization that deals with financial data, customer financial data through lines of credit, loans, general financial information. That could be accountants, CPA firms, tax preparation services, credit unions, financial counselors, mortgage brokers, auto dealers, financial advisors, etc. So there are really 6 major things that you need to do to get compliant with this new FTC safeguards rule. And you need to think of compliance as not really just a task. It's kind of a journey. There's a lot of things that you need to do initially to get it set up. And then there's some ongoing things you need to go through as well. So we're going to go through 6 key things that you need to implement to stay compliant with this. First thing is you need to pick a security supervisor or hire one. You need to make sure that they are a qualified individual to implement and supervise your company's information security program. So this can be someone that is internal. It can be an internal employee. It can also be a partner, an affiliate, a service provider like Accent, for example. But ultimately, they need to be someone that is qualified to oversee and make sure the security is getting implemented, but also they're the ones responsible for making sure that that it's getting completed and properly documented. So that's the first step. Second thing is you need to do a conduct a risk assessment. So where is the data that you have? What type of data do you have on your network that would be fall under this? That could be bank account numbers, social security numbers, date of births, EIN, TIDs, any kind of personal identifiable information. You need to identify what you have, where it's at. It could be on your server, it could be on the workstations, it could be in the cloud. You need to know where it is and have that documented. Once you know what that data is and where it's at, you need to calculate what is the realistic and foreseeable risk and threats that we have. That could be internal threats, that could be external threats. You need to understand what that is and also have it well documented so that it's a clear understanding of what your risks are. Typically, you want to do the risk assessment at minimum on an annual basis. Some companies do it twice a year, but at minimum, most companies would do it at least once a year. Third thing you want to do is you want to start implementing the data safeguards. And this is probably the most complicated and more difficult steps to complete. There's a lot of things under this, so we're going to dive into it. The first thing is you need to implement and review who has access to what. So all this data that you have that falls under this FTC safeguard rule, you want to provide kind of the least privilege to it. So only the people that absolutely have to access that data have access to it. And if there's not a need for someone to have access to it, don't give them access to it. You're just creating more holes and more vectors to have a breach. So that's the first thing, is to go through, really lock it down, make sure those people who absolutely have to have access to it can access it, no one else does. Next thing you need to do is a periodic data inventory audit. And that's really just an accurate list of all your systems, all your computer systems, all your devices, all your platforms, all your personnel, just an up-to-date list that you have at all times, so you can keep track of where your inventory is. And you can keep track of that and adjust if something's missing or out of date. Third thing is you need to make sure this data is encrypted. So people talk about encryption. There's a lot of different ways that you can think of it. There's data that is at rest. That's kind of a file level. So for example, like Word files, Excel files, those kind of things, those you can encrypt those files. Sometimes those are built into the tools, like Microsoft has the ability to encrypt it natively, but there's also third-party tools you could use to encrypt really any kind of file you want. But those are kind of file level at rest. There's also files at rest that's on the disk level that's encrypted. So that's typically enforced on like mobile phones and laptops. You want to make sure that data is encrypted if it has the ability to be moved around. Obviously, if you have a theft of a laptop or a phone and the data is encrypted, anything that they have on that device, email is usually the most is usually the most risky thing. They can access all that. The third thing under encryption is you need to think about data that's in motion. So in motion would be like we're sending an email, or we're receiving an email, or we're sending a file transfer. So if you have sensitive data that's customer facing that you need to send back and forth, or to your partners or other vendors that you work with, and it has important data on it, that you need to make sure it's encrypted. So there are some tools out there and services out there that can help make sure you can send secure email and receive secure email and transfer those type of files. So that's one that if you don't have it implemented, you need to make sure you get started. The next thing is assessing the type of apps that you guys have and making sure that those apps that you have are meeting the other data safeguard requirements. So, not everything has the best security. So, for example, if you guys use, Sage or QuickBooks, you want to make sure that those tools, if it's hosted, whether it be in the cloud or on premise or through some other provider, you still have to meet all the other data safeguard regulations. So if they don't have MFA, if they don't have the data encrypted, you need to check with it. And you might have to switch vendors or switch different products to make sure that that is compliant as well. So you need to go through, check all the apps that you use that are related to this, make sure they meet those requirements, and talk to those vendors and verify that it's good. Next is MFA, multi-factor authentication. So most companies typically have email MFA set up today. In general, they should. A lot of companies are starting to implement MFA throughout their whole organization through the VPN that they access, through the server, and even the desktops, and any other applications or web apps that you might access. So this is one of the requirements, is to have MFA on really all facets that can access this customer information. So you need to go through, make sure that's implemented too. Next is disposing of customer information securely. So really two areas that I like to think of with this. You have, let's say a laptop or computer that's end of life and it's time to decommission it and get it out and retire it. The easiest way with that is to physically destroy the hard drive, like just destroy it. When you're dealing with other data, maybe like a customer that you worked with 5 years ago or 3 years ago, and you no longer need that data, that's really just coming up with policies and systems and routines to go through and purge that data and make sure you get it out of there. Obviously, if you're holding that data, that's your risk and liability for your organization. No need to contain that if you're no longer doing business with them. So having a policy for that is required. The next thing is planning and anticipating the new risks. So cybersecurity is changed a lot over the past 5 years. It's getting more complex. The attacks are getting more sophisticated. And really what the FTC is saying here is, what works today is not necessarily what's going to be the best practice in 6 months or a year from now and beyond. So staying up to date as far as what those evolving risks look like, and changing the tools as new tools become available, implementing new layers of security. Those are all things that they're really saying here that you need to make sure that you're anticipating for. The next one is really maintaining logs of activity. So the only real way to do this for most environments is to set up a SIEM. The SIEM is a security event information management system. And effectively what it is, it's a big logging system that keeps track of everything that happens. It's really common in the medical field for companies that fall under HIPAA regulations. It's also really common for companies that have DoD requirements under CMMC. But a SIEM is really just a logging device. It keeps track of everything, people who log in, things they download, files they access. It's just a list of everything that happened. And the whole point of this is so that in the event there is a breach or something maliciously happens on the network, you can track and see what was really your exposure. And that can really depend on what course of action needs to happen, with that. So what they're asking is that you implement that. And along with that, and a SIEM covers this too, and that is monitoring for unauthorized access. And there's multiple ways to do that, both in the cloud as well as on-premise too. So this third step, implementing the data safeguard, probably the most complicated because there's a lot. This is where I think most organizations spend the most of the time to try and get certified or compliant. But this one is a big one. So next is monitoring and testing the safeguards. So, it's one thing to define a policy, it's a whole nother thing implementing it, and more importantly, validating it, right? There's really 3 things that you have to do. So all these policies, all these configurations that need to be set up, you have to make sure it's getting done and it's being maintained regularly. So the FTC really says there's 2 ways you can do this. You can either, one, have a system in place that is always monitoring it, like continuous monitoring, to make sure that you are keeping the systems up to date, having MFA, like that you're meeting all these data safeguard requirements. Or alternatively, if you don't have a system like that, then what you can do is you can have a system in place to do, every 6 months, an annual pen test and a vulnerability assessment. So they kind of give you one or the other. I recommend doing both. We typically do both for our clients that have FTC compliance needs. In general with security, it's layers, and you always want to. There's always a vector out there that you find, and you want to patch them. And the only way to really find that is to do frequent scans. So that's the 4th thing. Next item here would be employee security training. So 98% of all breaches are ultimately caused by human error. People are clicking on links they shouldn't, they're typing in information, they're using the same passwords from one website to the next, the same thing they use at home. You have to train your people today. They are ultimately your biggest threat, and they're the most likely vector that an attack is going to come through. So the only way to really do that is through cybersecurity training. And the FTC is saying that you need to provide this for your employees, and you need to have a continuous awareness training as well. So what we typically recommend is a system that we use. It's kind of an initial cybersecurity training where there's modules. It can take about an hour to go through it. And then there's ongoing micro training and annual training as an update as well. So that would be something that we'd recommend. The other thing that we find a lot of companies want to do is also have like dark web monitoring. This would give you notification of what is out there on the dark web. And if something new comes out there, you get notified for that as well. So they added another thing in here too, saying that anyone that is ultimately responsible for maintaining your information security program, so if you do this in-house, whoever you assign as the data security officer, you need to make sure they are getting specialized training to stay up to date with this. So this is not someone that you necessarily assign that's not savvy. They have to be tech savvy, security savvy. What we would recommend, or at least internally in our organization, we make sure people who are working in this and accredited for it have a CISSP or a CISSM. These are, people who are in the security world for 5+ years. Alternatively, if you were going to bring someone in-house to do some of this and they're savvy but maybe don't have 5 years of experience in security, you can maybe go with like a CompTIA Security Plus as kind of an entry-level step for that. But ultimately, what they want to do is make sure that the person who's responsible for this is accredited in some capacity and they're getting ongoing training. So the sixth thing, which is really the last thing, is defining and having an incident response plan. So, what is an incident response plan? Well, effectively, it's a what-if plan. What happens if we actually have a breach, a serious one? How are we going to take care of it? A breach is a terrible experience. If you've never had one or a big one, it can destroy a business. It can destroy your reputation. There's a lot of people that get involved in an event of a breach. There's you. There's potentially your IT provider if you're outsourcing it. If you have cyber insurance, they're going to be involved. You might have law enforcement involved, possibly even the FBI. You're going to have your attorney maybe involved. You're going to have your customers involved, and you're going to have potentially even employees if you have employee data that's being exposed. So there's a lot of people involved with it. You need to protect yourself and you need to have a really good game plan. There are also, these threats are getting more serious. So some of these larger ransomware events, like the FBI, for example, I was at a conference a couple weeks ago in Nashville, and they had a local agent from the FBI stop by, and he was describing how it's getting so bad that the FBI doesn't even have the bandwidth to investigate some of these claims anymore. So the example they said was, like in Nashville specifically, they won't investigate a ransomware event unless it's been at least $1 million of an impact. In New York, it's $100 million. So depending on the severity of an impact, you might not be able to get the support from law enforcement in the event of a massive breach. So that's something to be aware of. But yeah, ultimately the incident response plan, it's a game plan. It's how are we going to define it? Who's responsible for what? How are we going to navigate through the situation? What are we to disclose? The other thing that you want to think about if you have an incident response is, if you do have cyber insurance, one of the first things they do is they hire a cyber forensics team to come in, and they're going to assess and verify that you have implemented what you said you would implement on those disclosures. And if you don't have that filled out properly, or you didn't answer honestly, that could jeopardize what you could get paid out in a claim. So anyways, an incident response plan, it's a very important component of this. It's the last step of the FTC as far as the safeguard requirements, but it's probably one of the more important ones that you hopefully never have to use. But if you do, you have it written down and you know what you need to do to move forward with that. So we've got a document that you can go and download. If you go to axeconsulting.com safeguard checklist, I think we're going to post that here in the chat here in a minute. And I think we'll send out an email as well that you guys can have. This is the same stuff we just went over today. It's just a PDF version you can download and read and kind of verify that you're going through all the core steps for it. So I recommend you do that. Next, if your company is struggling with this, if you guys are behind and you don't have this stuff implemented and you need some help, reach out to us. We can have a quick complimentary call. We can assess and see what it takes to get you guys FTC compliant as soon as possible. I can't promise you'll get done before June 9th, but if that is of interest, go to our website, axeconsulting.com/safeguards chat. Once again, we'll put that in the chat as well. And either me or someone from our team or one of our security officers can talk to you about your particular situation and how to get you guys compliant as soon as possible. Next, so this is something I would recommend regardless, whether you're a customer that has FTC requirements or you're just a business that needs to know where you stand security-wise. But what we recommend really to all companies is to have at some point an independent security scan. To us, that is it can kind of give you as an owner or a manager of the company peace of mind of, hey, we're good. We have our security is pretty well stacked. Or potentially it'll show you what gaps you have. So we offer a service for this. It is a paid service where we would go through, we check your backups, make sure you have a good backup strategy in place. We check your accounts, active accounts in the systems. If you have 365, there's some security things we'll check on that, make sure it's set up properly. Encryption, like we can check the encryption on your computers. We can scan for PII data to see if you have things out there that are in areas that shouldn't be. We can verify your patch maintenance, like are your machines actually getting patched and your servers if you have that. Is your antivirus tools modern? Are they going to detect like the more sophisticated password harvesting tools that are out there today? Firewall, is your firewall configured right? Is it doing deep packet inspection and some of these other things that are really required to make sure your network is secured? So that's a small assessment of like what we offer for that. We are doing a webinar special. If you have a small environment with less than 25 endpoints or around that number, typically we charge $12.50 for it. But for this, we're doing a $4.95 deal. If you have more than 25 computers, but less than 100, then normally we charge $2,500 for it, but we're offering that at $9.95. So if that is of interest and you want a third-party assessment, what we do is we would reach out to you guys, go through, schedule a time. We'll scan your network, scan all your computers, scan all your servers, analyze your firewalls, and then we'll do a readout meeting, which typically takes about an hour, and we'll give you all the report and all the data that we find and with recommendations. If that's of interest, go to the website, accessconsulting.com, security special, and fill that out, and we will schedule that for you. Jessica, I think we're at the end here. So do we have any questions lined up?
Yes, we got a few.
Yep.
The first one here, I think you did answer this one, but we'll just reiterate it. It
Sure.
was, do I have to be the appointed security person for my firm?
No, you do not have to be. If you don't have the expertise in house, if someone in your firm is not a specialist in this, then you can have a third party company do it or an affiliate do it as well. We just have to understand your requirements and understand your business before we can.
Okay, next question is, what should I do if a client sends me personal information like social security number through email?
Yeah, so that's not good. What we would recommend is you immediately reach out to them and say, please don't send this again. I would ask them to delete it as well as you on your end too, to get it out of your system, because you don't want that data in email. The best practice for that is really if your firm does not have a way to securely receive secured email or send secure email, then you should implement that. But ultimately, you need to get out of the system as soon as possible, because if that data is in your Outlook or in your email, in your 365 or your Gmail, it's a risk factor, and it's PII data that could be exposed.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next question. We have MFA on our email already because our cyber insurance requires it. I need to have it on my computers, VPN, and servers too. Can you elaborate?
So so cyber insurance companies have been pretty good about requiring companies to have MFA on at minimum email for a couple of years now, which is great. It's a good first step. That's the most accessible way that hackers are going to come through is through email and office.com or Google Workspace. But ultimately what the FTC is saying here under the safeguard rules is you need to have MFA on really anything that they could access that data. So whether that be your computers, that if you have access in your network, or if you have servers or a hosted app or a third-party app that you use, you need to have MFA on all those vectors, including VPN too, if that's to get into, if your network contains that kind of a financial data.
All right. I'm using a third-party app to house customer data. They're supposed to take care of all the security. Do I have to do anything else if that's the case? And I think you did answer this one, but let's reiterate that as well.
Yeah, basically you need to verify with them, are they meeting the FTC safeguard rules? I would ask them to provide that to you in writing if you're unsure about it.
Okay. Is a SIM a physical device or a software, and how do I get it in place?
So you can do either or. The one we typically use is more of a software-based one, but there are some that are hardware-based that will scan the entire network, and they still have agents that install on the workstations and the servers. So I mean, at all times, it's always going to be a software solution, but there's also a hardware component that you can have depending on the complexity of your network and how much you're hosting locally versus in the cloud.
Okay. Is a CISSP the only accreditation I should look for?
I wouldn't say it's the only one. They didn't the FTC didn't specify what is required. They just said that they need to be someone with adequate security experience. So the industry, the IT industry, has defined that people with CISSPs or CISSMs are experts in cybersecurity and have a proven record of it. So we would recommend they have that if they are at that level of education and experience, but the FTC doesn't specifically require that.
Okay. If anybody else has any more questions, last call. But that was everything we had so far. Okay. I think we're done with questions then. It doesn't look like we're getting any more. So we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. Again, I will send out emails to everybody with those links that we talked about. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, guys.